Thing that you should do before getting a Livestock Guardian dog would be to set boundaries. Now you could do an electric fence, not an electric fence, but an invisible fence with the collar, buzzes or makes noises, warning them as they come up on the boundary lines. That could be a good system to use at the same time as a physical fence, but the number one thing you should have is a physical fence. If you just have an invisible fence or whatever other electronic system that, GPS fence, whatever it is, with no physical fence, there's a good chance that if they really felt like they needed to, they would blast right through it and they would be gone. I don't know how they work, if they let the dog come back in the boundaries once they've left, or if they're stuck outside of it. Maybe one of you guys can answer that. We have not actually used one of those fences before, but just from what we see with behaviors with past dogs with e-collars, the warning and a shock or whatever settings you have it to, I don't know what your feelings are in that area, but whatever settings you have it to, if there's a strong enough reason for them to ignore that signal that you're sending them, it will blast right through whatever boundary you have set, and especially Livestock Guardian dogs. And these were on our cattle dog and on our husky mix. We've not put e-collars on our Livestock Guardian dogs, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, except for, say, an invisible fencing system, but also as a backup. I'm kind of rambling here, but bear with me. So the first thing you should have, and this was the first thing we did when we moved here. We moved here a little bit over a year ago. There was nothing else here, just the house and our little, what we've turned into a goat barn, but a little storage shed. There was no fencing. And so the first few months that we were here with, how many dogs did we have at the time? I think we only had 3. No, we had 4. We had 2 pet dogs. Actually, no, we had 3 and a guardian dog. No, oh goodness. Okay, we had 4. We had 2 guardian dogs and 2 pet dogs. That one of the pet dogs is gone now. He was pretty old, and so we put him to sleep a couple months later. But we didn't have the fence, and walking, we had to walk the dogs, and we're not big on the tether method, but to go to the bathroom, we would put them on a tether for 5 minutes, let them go. If I have 4 little kids, if I couldn't get out with them, we would put them on the tether to go to the bathroom and then bring them back inside. Or for a little while, we had a very small area for our guardian dog for the first couple of weeks before we got a fence up. And that was terrible. So first thing you want, before you even, maybe you have the puppy, plan on getting a fence in the first few months, have the money set aside for that, have the plans set, have the fencer set, have all of that set before you get that dog. That would be my biggest recommendation. Our fence is 4 feet tall. You're probably, depending on how you raise the dogs or the dog's personality that you have, that's not gonna keep them in necessarily. We plan on, our dog is over there and he looks that way. We plan on adding either a line of electric or getting a sport dog fence. We're not sure which route we're going to go with that just yet, but our dogs have not left home. I might need to move. My kids want to ride their bikes up and down our driveway. Before I do that, let's talk about the gates that we have. So we have this system. Our dogs do a pretty good job of not running out this first gate. They've learned that, they don't cross into that area because we're always kicking them out of it whenever they go into it. So your dogs will pick up on stuff like that. But for us, this is the biggest peace of mind to make sure that our goats don't get out when we're leaving, or our dogs don't get out when we're leaving. Just as a backup, we drive through this first gate, then we shut it, then we open the gate by the street, and then we go. One gate is shut, so there's no accidental escapes from anyone. And if you watch, I'll link the other video. I'm not good at this yet, so maybe it'll be up here. I'll link that one video. Maybe it'll be at the end. I might just do it at the end. But I cover a video on training livestock guardian dogs, whether or not you should be raising them indoors or outdoors. And I'm not going to say what my opinion on that was, but you do want your dogs not only bonded to your livestock, but bonded to you. And I think that's a big reason why the ones that we have we have one that we didn't ever really train the method that we've used on all the others. And we keep him in an enclosure inside the fence. So we haven't really seen that with him, but bear with me, guys. So I think a big reason why our dogs have not left our fenced-in area, at least that we know of, is that they're fairly well bonded to us, and there's always something going on at home. We do homeschool, and so instead of both of us being gone to work during the day, one of us is generally home. If we're both gone, for extracurriculars, or one of the kids' lessons or sports or something, we're usually back within a few hours. We're not gone for normally a whole day. And so I think they tend to stay with us, stay with the animals, and they're just really well bonded to this whole area. So we haven't had an issue with that yet, but we are planning on at some point putting in some kind of backup just in case. If I had a treat in my pocket and I really wanted him to come, I would have used that right now, but I don't, so I'm not going to use it. That's our special word for him. That looks like a deer vertebrae to me. Before we knew any better, we got 2 puppies at the same time when we were in Tennessee, planning to raise them up at the same time and hopefully be our pair that kind of ran our whole property. I mean, they were already a handful, but then a unforeseen move popped up. We ended up moving from Tennessee to Wisconsin, and we didn't feel it was fair to them to keep both puppies because there's no way we were going to be able to focus on both of them for the amount that we needed to be able to focus on them with 4 kids, a move, states away, having to build the infrastructure here. Hey, bud. And then also training the puppies. So we ended up, this is Apollo that just walked up, we ended up keeping him and sending our other dog, Artemis, to a friend's. Well, the friend didn't have, I don't know if the training got out of hand for them or if it was entirely just the fact that they didn't have a fence, but she started roaming. She started going down to their road, and they contacted us 6 months later, roughly 5-6 months later, saying they couldn't keep her anymore. They looked into fencing, it was too expensive for them, and they needed to give her up. And I had said, if something doesn't work out, to let us know and we'll take her back no matter what. So we brought her back. Moral of the story is they didn't have a fence ready to go. We went several months without having a fence here. Have a fence ready. That's probably the number one thing before you get livestock guardian dogs. If you don't have a way to contain them, there are cheaper routes to take to protect your animals. Guardian dogs are not cheap. He eats a lot. You've got vet bills, and then you've got the fencing. If you don't have fencing, it's expensive to get started with them. We have another 10 acres unfenced that we're saving up for. If you're a small homestead, it's not the cheap way to go. If you're scrounging together things around your farm to repurpose and you're trying to be really frugal, getting a livestock guardian dog is not going to be your frugal option. If you're looking to protect your chickens, building a more solid coop, electrifying your current pasture, if you have one for whatever animals you have, might be, depending on the wiring or depending on the fencing that you have, might be the cheaper route to go. They will get right through barbed wire. They will get through 2 to 3 strands of electric. What I've seen generally recommended from people is about 5, closer together, nearer to the ground, and increasing in distance the higher up you get. But I've watched them, their coats are so thick, they'll just dive for it, or they'll just jump right through and they won't even feel a thing. So you have to have a solid boundary. I could probably have said this in a more succinct way, but that's the biggest thing. On larger acreage, it's probably okay to have a GPS fence or something else like that, but also on larger acreage, it's not going to be as necessary. You might have a road that's high traffic. Some people live off of busy highways, busy streets, and a GPS fence that their dog blasts through because they're chasing a coyote or a wolf or whatever else that they could be chasing to get off the property. They're gonna just blast through it, run off into the road. I'm gonna move because it's getting windy and something just fell. That's the tree I was standing under. And I don't know. I think it's dead. Don't think that barbed wire alone is going to keep them in. Don't think that 2 or 3 strands of electric is going to keep them in. So large acreage is going to be out in the middle of nowhere. Maybe you're on 1,000 acres, something like that, where there really isn't. They'll still branch out over that whole area to establish their territory to help keep predators at bay, but it's not going to be necessarily the same situation for those of us that live, with our neighbors across the street or off of a busy street. They say, what do they say? They say good fences make good neighbors. So make sure you're not that neighbor that gets a Great Pyrenees or a Anatolian or some other livestock guardian breed, or a dog for that matter, and then just thinks that they're going to stay on their property because it's your property and they somehow know that it's your property. They don't. They're going to go where they think they need to go to prevent your animals from being eaten. Make sure you do the right thing, make sure you're prepared, and make sure you know what you're getting into. Just so you guys have an idea of how big these dogs are. My palm of his footprint is bigger than the palm of my hand. Before getting a livestock guardian, the sun came out. I already have frown lines. Just increase them a little bit.